Be sure to go to flipsidegaming.com and use promo code 6 for 10% off on orders over $10. You can do the same at the Grizzly Gentleman for some fantastic beard products that'll make your beard look and smell great. You can also go to TCG Player using the affiliate link below and shop there to help support the show. And last but absolutely not least, go to greyvikinggames.com with the link below to get those sweet arena codes. What is up, Planeswalkers? Thyrix6 back with some more Mythic or Missed It, the show where I talk about all of the sets of Magic the Gathering that include Mythics, and I determine, based on my own opinion, whether or not I believe that the Mythics included are Mythics, or if Wizards missed it. Now, you might notice something. There's a big white space here. Remember how I said I was going to attempt to make this a little bit better? I have. For what it's worth, I think the complexity one at the top needs a little bit of work. Just a little bit of tweaking. Doesn't stand out as well as I wanted. So how do we rate these Mythics? Well, we rate them on complexity at the top, splashiness in the middle, and power on the bottom. I made that power emblem myself. It took me longer than I could have just downloaded a PNG from the internet. However, I decided to learn a few more tools, and I figured out how to make that 100% myself. By the way, it was trial and error. So, I actually have decided to create actual criteria for these. So for complexity, I'm looking at, and by the way, if I'm missing something, please let me know. I'm looking at deck building requirements. So does this change the way you're building your deck? Does it change the rules of the game? So looking at something like Progenitus, this is a card that has protection from everything. That's the type of thing I'm looking at, like how it changes the game. Send Triplets allows you to cast cards from your opponent's hand, right? That's the type of thing when I'm saying change the game. Not necessarily like Thalia makes things cost more. Although, theoretically, if the effect were big enough, it would be included. The number of keywords. This essentially is the Achroma effect. Does it have just a bunch of things? Does it have flying, haste, and first strike? Well, it gets a little bit of a tick there for complexity. Board state. So, does this make the board state incredibly complicated? Does it make attacking and blocking super difficult? Does it make casting spells just really wonky, right? It's just how much mental math do you have to do because this card is on the board, right? That type of thing. And then costs. Costs are kind of wonky here, but essentially it's just does it have any extra bits that cost things that aren't mana, right? Does it require you to jump through some sort of hoop? Does it require you to do something that majority of other cards don't really have you do? So that's for complexity. And we're rating it on a 1 to 5 scale. We have 1, we have 5, and we have all the numbers in between. So now it should be a little bit easier when I'm going through and talking about each of the cards what exactly I'm talking about. And I'll be trying to record on freaking pen and paper each of these totals for complexity, splashiness, and power. And then I'll say at the end what the average is. So, moving on to splashiness. So here we're looking at the size. Now that sounds strange. And it's kind of hard for me to quantify. And that's for what it's worth, that's kind of a lot of the splashiness. So size includes the mana cost, right? A big mana cost is splashy, even if it isn't good. Does that make sense? It's also not necessarily complex, right? Just because something costs a lot doesn't mean it's difficult to cast or anything like that. It could literally be a 16 green. Is it 12 green? I don't care. I don't remember the mana cost of that dumb indestructible Convoke creature. Its size could also mean how much of something it does, right? For example, if there was a sorcery that just said deal 1,000 damage, I'm exaggerating a bit, but that would be a point for splashiness. Effect, also, this is kind of similar to size, except for the fact that it's just when it... Effect and impact are very similar. They're very connected. It's can you windmill slam this card? And when you do, does it make other people go, ooh, or, oh, right? That type of thing. And then flavor. I've decided to remove Flavor Nod as its own thing and wrap it into the splashiness of a card. Because I realized a lot of the time when I was talking about splashiness, I was referencing something about, you know, the art matching together with the card, right? And putting the flavor nod kind of in there anyway. So flavor nod is now a part of my rating for Splashiness. Power is the last thing. And this is how we're rating power. It's level of play in Constructed. It's level of play in EDH. It's level of usability in Casual, non-EDH Casual. And whether or not this card would destroy Limited if it weren't Mythic. So those are the main actual concrete things that I'm looking for when I'm talking about cards. Hopefully that all makes sense. And let's hop into M10. M10 was the first core set that came after the introduction of Mythics. And you'll notice we have the Lorwyn 5. The Lorwyn 5 were the 5 Planeswalkers who were originally printed in Lorwyn, even though they were supposed to be printed in Future Set, but because Lorwyn came before the invention of Mythics, the set following, they were only rare, but technically Planeswalkers are meant to be Mythic, even though at this point we do have uncommon Planeswalkers, which is still kind of strange, but it's fine. It's fine. Johnny Goldbane. We didn't talk about him when he was rare, but he's been upshifted. Alright, we'll talk about upshifted cards, depending exactly on why they were upshifted. These were upshifted because they're meant to be Mythic. As usual, I'll say that it's very difficult for a Planeswalker not to get the Mythic rating, but we're still going to go through our criteria. So when it comes to complexity, it definitely points you towards a certain style of deck build. You want to be having cards that gain life. You also want to be having creatures so that you can use your minus. You can care about 1/1 counters. And then, of course, your avatar cares about you having a very large life total. You know, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. It doesn't really do wacky stuff with rules. It doesn't immediately affect the board wipe all that much. It can. You know, it can just give your creatures +1/+1 and gained vigilance, which could theoretically help in a race, but it doesn't like make the board state super weird. Like, it just like, my creatures have been enlarged and they can attack and still block, right? It doesn't have any wonky costs. I think for Johnny here, we're gonna give him a pretty low 2. It's very, very non-complex card. Technically speaking, Planeswalkers, you know what? Because of that, because Planeswalkers are still early here, we're gonna say Johnny gets a 3 for complexity just because he's a Planeswalker. All right. When it comes to Splashiness, it's not a very big card. Art is cool. Again, we're getting Lorwyn 5, so this is the... If it weren't for the Lorwyn 5 being rares, if they were very first introduced as Mythics, even if it were in Lorwyn, but they just had a Mythic symbol, people would be like, what the fuck is this, like, orange symbol, right? Then it would have gotten a lot more for general, like, splashiness, right? You know, you don't windmill slam this card. You're not like, boom, I have a Johnny Goldbane tower. Flavor, you know, this is still kind of before we got a lot more information about the Lorwyn 5 and kind of who they are. So for splashiness, it's a Planeswalker. Shut up. Planeswalker automatically kind of gets a 2 for splashiness, just because it is a Planeswalker. Over time, we might lower that down, just because at some point Planeswalkers become not special anymore necessarily. So then we get to power. Johnny, if I recall correctly, did see some constructed play in EDH. Boom, boom, boom. We can see that he's not really played in all that many decks that can play him. So this essentially is looking at all of the mono white decks that he is like legally allowed in, and he's only in this many of those. I believe technically I could search for just decks that care about life gain, just decks that care about 1/1 counters, but I'm much more interested in just how many total is he being played out. And you can see not a ton right now. You know, just a 4-drop that comes down with 4 loyalty and only gains you 2 on the plus is a pretty weak card in terms of GDH. In casual, so I remember fondly playing casual. And when I played casual, at least, it was a format where you played with cards. A lot of them were 1-ofs and 2-ofs. And you never felt comfortable attacking until you knew you could kill your opponent. At least that's what me and my friends would do. And so, very frequently, you can just get to an absurd life total with this. Your opponent's never going to want to attack in because they can't kill you and they don't want to lose their creatures because they felt creatures were too valuable. And yeah, it has some casual power. Limited. I legitimately don't recall how it was in its limited environment, but I have to think kind of holistically for limited until we get to sets where I actually knew a little bit about the limited environment. If this were a rare and limited, would it be too strong? I don't think it would, because it doesn't protect itself. So I think for power... I messed up how it looks. Okay, it still works. For power... I'm gonna give it a 2. By the way, I should mention, 1 means something is lacking that, right? A 1 in complexity means this is like a dull card. A 1 in splashiness means that this is it's not like, oh, it's not cool. It has no wow factor. You know, you don't feel anything. A 1 in power level means it's way underpowered. Like, it's essentially like, it's a garbo mythic, right? It's something that you do not care about in the slightest about owning, right? 5 is to the max. 5 on complexity is like, this card is mind-boggling to understand. 5 on splashiness is just like, this feels awesome. Godsire, for me, 5 on splashiness. And then 5 on power means it's too strong. Even as a mythic, it's just too powerful. So 3s are absolutely fine. 2s are just a little bit wanting, and 4s are a pretty great spot overall. 4s are the things that are kind of like, cool. Am I satisfied with 2 on a Johnny's power? You know what? I'm not respecting a Johnny enough. I'll give him a 3. I'll give him a 3. So I think we give a Johnny a 3. So we have 3, 2, 3, right? Out of 15, essentially, which is what this is. He only gets, what is that? Friggin' 8. Only gets an 8 out of 15. That's not all that much. However, because it's a Planeswalker, and it's still kind of early, a Johnny's a mythic. Now, I will say it's going to be annoying as hell to reset all of these every time. Just because of the way I have to, like, literally put them onto my stream deck. But, you know what? Shut up. How about that? Next up is Baneslayer Angel. This was the introduction to Baneslayer Angel. Baneslayer Angel, a card that was reprinted in 2021, still a mythic, notably, but does it pass the test? Complexity. Well, let's go on let's go first things first. It passes the Acroma test with flying colors. Flying, first strike, lifelink, protection from demons and from dragons. Easily. Very powerful card. Additionally, excuse me, it does affect the board state, and it's kind of just because of those keywords that it affects the board state, but it still affects the board state, right? This is a card that it comes down, and because it has first strike and lifelink, your opponents are really gonna have a difficulty. Dude, my cat's just like standing over her fish pet. Nope, she bit it. All right, fish. Toy, not pet, sorry. Our cat doesn't have a pet fish. Baneslayer. What was I saying? Complexity. Yeah, other than that, she doesn't have a lot of things. She doesn't require deck building costs. You can literally throw her into anything. She doesn't change anything weird about the rules. She only really has keyword and board state going for her. Even though, because she does have the kind of keyword soup, and I do enjoy keyword soup, I give her a 3 for complexity. There are things you'll have to remember. For what it's worth, the fact that protection from demons and dragons doesn't come up always. When it does matter, it can be overlooked, and that is one of the reasons that it has that additional complexity, because it is something that you have to keep track of, something you have to remember. Splashiness. Oh, I forgot something for splashiness. It's like squareness. Squareness is just, this has 5 cost, 5 power, 5 toughness, 5 abilities technically. Flying, first strike, lifelink, protection from dragons, protection from demons. It's 5s. So on the splashiness, it has a little point there. The size of the creature. I mean, it's a 5 mana 5/5 that does extra, right? I tend to think that's a nice splashable size. It's not the biggest thing, but it's fairly nice. Flavor didn't really have any. Protection for demons and dragons. Demons makes sense. Dragons, why are you beefing with dragons? Why are dragons a bane? Don't exactly get it. Why aren't? I mean, technically, it's just because this is white and the anti-colors to white are black and red, which have demons and dragons. But still, Hydras, Sphinxes, Are Sphinxes still Blue's iconic? No, not. I don't remember the difference between iconic and the other word that I've forgotten at this point. Anyway, for Splashiness, again, I think we can give her a respectable 3. When this comes down, for what it's worth, at this point in time, when it comes down, it's like a little bit of nostalgia there. But even at the time, the card was very like, oh, you've played a Baneslayer, right? And then when it comes to power, absolutely has been in several different constructed environments. She was in this core set, she was in 2011, and now in 2021. And she's seen play across those areas. If I recall correctly, she did see a little bit of sideboard play during 2021 Standard. She has seen some sideboard play in Historic, but that has petered off quite a bit at this point, if I recall correctly. In EDH, she's in a decent number of decks. 2% is not a ton, but just literally compared to some of the other things, you definitely can see Baneslayer. I think I'm still playing Baneslayer Angel in one of my decks, and I think it's just the keyword soup. The protection from demons and dragons does actually matter. And going back to the constructed, I forgot. This core set was right after Shards of Alara, which had a relatively high demon and dragon themes for Grixis and Jund, respectively. So she did already have some power there. In casual, if you're playing this card in casual, we hated you. This card, really fun to play in casual. If this were a rare only, this card would be stupid. A 5 mana, 4/4, I think a 5 mana 3/4 flyer is fine in white in limited most of the time. Not great. Usually it'll be like a 3/4 with First Strike, or maybe Vigilance, or it'll be like a 5 mana 3/3 with Set Mechanic and Flying. So, I mean, for limited, if this card was rare, it would be stupid. I think this is very illustrious 4. That takes us to a very easy 10. And, that's absolutely good. Absolutely mythic territory right there. I feel like... See, I gotta do a little bit more work to see if... So I'm using my Stream Deck as the way I'm putting all of these up on the board, because I don't edit things. I don't have time for that. This took me a long time to do, but I only had to do it once, right? If I had to extrapolate that out to every other mythic or mystic that I do, I will no longer make videos. So yeah, I have to figure out if there's a way I can just have something to turn off the sources that have been selected. Because right now I can toggle them. That's what I'm doing with this, to toggle them. But I wonder if I can do it a little differently. Anyway, next up we have Jace Beleren. Jace, the emo kid. Jace, the dude who's doing this because he got you with the game. Is Jace. It's not Baby Jace technically. Baby Jace is the 2-mana Jace. This is like OG Jace, I think is what I typically call OG Jace. And OG Jace, in terms of complexity, the fact that he does have both players draw a card or have a target player draw a card, and the fact that it's target player, so you can choose yourself or someone else, and the ultimate is target player puts the top 20, it does mean that there are some deck building considerations to be made, right? Are you going to be playing a deck where you want everyone to draw? Are you going to be playing a deck where you just want to draw cards yourself? Are you going to be playing a deck where you want to get to that ultimate so you can mill your opponent? Or are you going to mill yourself? Right? There are some deck building considerations there. It also affects the board state insofar as, when I say board state, I mean does it make the decisions difficult during the game? And I think Jace has that. I think Jace definitely has turn by turn. Am I going to be using the plus or the minus? Obviously, when you get to the ultimate, it's whatever. But turn by turn, it's am I plussing so that I can keep my Jace protected longer, or am I minusing and just saying I don't want my opponent to have extra stuff? Blah blah blah. I mean, generally speaking, it's not like each of the individual abilities by itself are complex, but I think the decisions that you can make with the card give it a reasonable 3 on complexity for me. When it comes to splashiness, none of the effects are very splashy except for the ultimate, so you do have to take that into consideration. However, drawing card, not terribly splashy. It doesn't get a 1 because it is still a Planeswalker, but it's definitely not something nuts. In terms of constructed, I'm fairly certain that this did see constructed play during Lorwyn Standard. Would this see play? Oh my god. I do believe this would see play in Historic if it was introduced to Historic, and here's why. Jace plus Narset. You essentially build a deck that runs things like Prismari commands, Jace, other cards that have both people draw. There's the jellyfish, I don't know. But essentially, you just have a bunch of cards that say both people draw. You minimize the amount that your opponent can draw and maximize the amount you can draw. You can also play effects that hurt your opponent for drawing. I think it would see play if it were in Historic. I don't think it would be busted, but I do think it would see play. Although, for what it's worth, a lot of that is just based on the fact that it would see play alongside Narset, because Narset's a broken card. Anyway, once again, in 2% of decks, it is just generally a fun, fine Planeswalker. In EDH, the consideration of +2 is kind of a lot worse because you are giving cards to more people. However, it increases the complexity of the card because now you have further deck building choices, right? It's not, I mean, technically you could do Turbo Fog with Jace, but and constructed, but meh. But now you can do something like Group Hug with Jace. Now you're like, everyone gets a card. I'm being so nice and generous. Don't attack me. And then out of nowhere, you combo kill for the win. Not saying that you should do that. I'm just saying that it's possible. So yeah, once again, it's something that makes the game in EDH a little bit more interesting. So that is quite nice for Jace. Casual. This card actually, because it was relatively small and you would just plus it every turn to give your opponent extra resources. Typically, this card was like meh. I literally played with this card in casual. This was around the time where I was playing a lot of casual. And then in limited, if this card were rare, it would... Man, I don't know if it would be stupid busted. I think it would be good for sure, but it doesn't protect itself. You really couldn't play it on turn 3 because your opponent, like, if your opponent just plays a Grizzly Bear, right, if you -2 to draw a card, Jace is dead. I guess you could have played a Grizzly Bear. It depends on, like, turn order and things like that. I don't think that this card would be too stupid of a rare. But I God, every time. Yeah, I really got to figure out a slightly better configuration for this. Yeah. Yeah. I actually think I know what I'll do. I'm going to collapse them all. Because complexity is unlikely. I'll keep complexity on a separate one, because I think complexity is almost never going to be a 1 in Mythic. Yeah, I think that's what I'll do. Anyway, this also gets an 8, like a Johnny, and just like a Johnny, by the nature of it being Mythic, or being a Planeswalker, still gets the Mythic tag. For now, Jace. For now. Only for now. Very slowly moving on. Excuse me. We move on to Sphinx Ambassador. What fun. Sphinx Ambassador has a lot of text. Okay. Cares about dealing combat damage to a player. Search their library for a card. Then they name a card. If you search for a creature that has the same name, you can put it on the battlefield. Then they shuffle their library. That's it. Like, you get to search for a thing. You get a creature. If your opponent doesn't name that creature, you get to put the card on the battlefield. Okay. Deck building. Technically speaking, doesn't have a lot of deck building issues, right? It's like, whatever. Who cares? Changing of the rules. It allows you to search your opponent's library, and I know technically speaking, there are a few effects that do that, like surgical extraction type effects. However, there aren't a ton, right? It's not ubiquitous. and you're tutoring in their own deck, right? It's not like you're looking for something to exile or something so that no one gets it. You're looking for something to potentially steal, a very bribery style effect. It doesn't have keyword soup. Technically speaking, it only affects the board state if something happens. And then the cost is to hit your opponent with combat damage with this card. Meh. I guess technically speaking, it does matter for board state because like you have to block this every turn or else. There are some. Well, I'll get to that when I talk about power actually. So for complexity, I think just by the nature of you having to choose a creature card, it's very much like the poison problem in Princess Bride. You have to pick the card that your opponent will want to name because they don't think that you would pick it. Because, like, I'm already hurting my own brain. It's a 4 on complexity. you have to make fucking decisions here, okay? Splashiness. Splashiness, I'd say the card is pretty splashy. The size is kind of meh. It does have a decent high cost, decent normal body, frankly, okay body. But the impact on the board, right, is pretty decent, right? You're playing this card and your opponent is going to be like, that thing can't hit me. Because if that hits me, I have to make decisions. And if I make the decision wrong, my opponent's going to take one of my creatures. One of the best ones. Or maybe one of the worst ones. Because you're subverting their expectation and you just need it for an extra body or whatever. So for Splashiness, I think it's a pretty average 3. The effect is very splashy. You're essentially getting to steal. But other than that, it doesn't have much more going for it. If it had a little bit more going for it, then I'd probably give it a 4, but as it is, I think that's reasonable. As for power, I don't recall this ever being played and constructed. Notice, I guess you can't notice anymore. This is worth $7 right now, and that's just because this is the only time it's ever been printed. So we also don't know if Wizard would modify the the value of this card, the rarity of this card. It is in very few decks. Very few decks. And there are some Sphinx decks, which I assume, that it would be mostly a part of. But yeah, it's not played a lot in EDH, especially nowadays. It could have changed in the past. But a 7 drop that doesn't do anything unless you hit your opponents with it, it's just not as good anymore, man. It's just not as good. Yeah, I think I feel like I owned this card at some point, or one of my friends may have owned this card. I don't remember it ever being great. Even though we played essentially singleton decks, which should make it better, although it still doesn't see all that much play in EDH. It just never really mattered all that much. If this were a rare instead of mythic, I could see it being very problematic if it were a rare. Even though it's a 7 drop, it still has an okay, like it's like the top of your sealed curve, right? Like, yeah, you play this card with the intention that it's like, it's your end game, I guess. But if you see it too often, I think it can just be very frustrating to constantly have to deal with this card. I think it would make, because limited is already, like, by its nature a bit more complex, because you have to, like, create your deck either one card at a time or from a sealed pool, and already, like, you have to make more, in my opinion, more deck building decisions than in constructed, even in, like, Legacy, because yeah, I'm not gonna explain it. So on the one hand, I want to give this a 2. Because it's not really played in Singleton, which is a format that you'd think it would be good in. But I also want to give it a 3. Because if it were rare, it would probably be too good and limited. But you know what? Limited. It gets a 2. Alright, and this is good old-fashioned, what, 9? How did this get a 9? Alright, this got a 9. I mean, it gets a 9. But I think we're going with a missed it here. Even though technically it did get more than the 2 Planeswalkers we've seen so far, the reason it's getting a 9, the reason it's getting a missed it is because of the fact that the power level is just a little too low. If this were a even just a 6-drop, you know, 4 blue, then it probably would have been fine. I think then it would have been Mythic. So this is kind of one of our first ones that's like, really, because it's just not good. Like, the effect is there. It's complex. Awesome. Cool. Sure. It's just kind of bad. Even though it's $7, it's only $7 in my opinion, because it has not been reprinted. So even though I doubt anybody wants it, it's not good enough. Time Warp. Yay! Yay, Time Warp. Awesome. So this is a reprint. It was printed first in Tempest as a rare, and then Starter 1999 as a rare. Then it was printed here as a Mythic, and then it was reprinted in Explorers of Ixalan, which was a little, like, extra game thing at Mythic. And, of course, Strixhaven Mystical Archive, which got it banned in Historic. In terms of complexity, it is complex because it's changing the rules, right? It's giving you an extra turn. It doesn't come with deck building changes. Technically speaking, doesn't come with like in-game complexity. You just get to take an extra turn. You don't have to do anything to get an extra turn, other than cast this. You don't have to. Yeah, I mean, you just don't. You cast mana, you get an extra turn. Okay. It's a 2 on complexity, in my opinion, because taking an extra turn isn't complex, right? You're just like, okay, I end my turn, I go to my turn. You know, there's some complexity there, but it has nothing else going for it. You know, it doesn't have a weird cost. Doesn't have anything extra with the extra turn, you know. I mean, there are extra turn cards that just have Delve and then, like, the same text. Those are more complex. In terms of Splashiness, this card is not splashy at all. The effect, the impact, like, you windmill, slam, Time Warp, you get to take the extra turn, which is very infuriating. Fun fact, everybody, I don't like extra turn spells. I don't know if you've noticed. It's very difficult to categorize this card's splashiness, because some part, like, there is a part of splashiness where it's actually simplistic, right? There's when a card is, and when I say simplistic, I don't necessarily mean like it's not high in complexity. It's the text is elegant, I guess is what I would say. If it was just like, I mean, for what this is literally just target player takes an extra turn after this one. That's relatively simple, like nice and crisp and clean and clear. I'm begrudgingly giving this a 3. And the reason I'm giving it a 3 is because it does have an immediate impact. You know, it's just like, boom, bang, bada ba boom, pow, right? I'm taking an extra turn. I just hate it, all right? I'm going to admit it, I just hate it. In terms of power level, well, it's banned in Historic. It has seen play in... I want to say it saw play when it was in Tempest, but I might be super wrong. It's legal in Commander. How often is this played? 3%. This is the highest percentage so far. I'm upset. By the way, 5 isn't good on power. This card is frustrating because it takes an extra turn. Am I being too mean? Yes, I am. It has a 10. Yes, it does. Is it Mythic? I mean, if this were rare, this would bust limited wide open. Like, you always look for Time Warp. So this is difficult. It's not complex. You know what? It's not difficult. It's not complex. It's not splashy. It's too strong. They missed it. Time walk effects just shouldn't exist, or they should be interesting in some way. I mean, well, we have like Alred's Epiphany, which is interesting. I'd still probably not say it's Mythic. I'd say that it's a Mystic, because I think it shouldn't fucking exist. I mean, I stand by it. Yeah, I stand by it. Thank you. Liliana Vess. Ooh, interesting. In terms of complexity, absolutely. You can force a single person discard. You get to search and put a card on top, so you have to really like understand the lines that are going to come up. Like, I have to, at sorcerer speed, get something that I have to play best to, one, keep on top, and two, make sure it's still useful by the time I draw it, right? And of course, the ultimate is you get literally every creature. So in terms of that, like, that is kind of rule changing. You're not really changing your deck building or anything like that. It's mostly just the on-board effect of the card, right? There are a lot of things that you can choose to do, right? Do you start plussing the loyalty in order to keep her alive a little bit longer? Do you immediately use her essentially as a 5 mana, I get to tutor once for sure, and maybe twice? Or do you essentially just say, I'm playing a discard deck, and I'm going to force you to keep discarding, right? That is, I mean, that I guess does have a little bit of deck building stuff. Other than that, it's not too much more complex, but I think it's a good complexity. I think that it is, because of the different things that she can do at any time, she gets some complexity. This is probably closer to like 3.8, maybe 3.6, but I'm still rounding that up to 4. In terms of splashiness, I mean, she's a tutor. We don't really know much about Liliana at this point. She doesn't immediately impact the board. You know, she's not coming down and like minus 4ing to make you sack 2 things. It's kind of a delayed splashiness, I feel. So I'm probably gonna give her 2 on splashiness. She's great, she's cool, but she's not everything. 2% of decks, it's pretty good. I'm certain she's seen play in Constructed. I think in 2015 she saw play in Constructed. I'm not entirely sure. Regardless, she's decent. Like, that's the thing, she's decent in all of the places that she's found in. I think this is probably for what it's worth, this is like the type of power level I like to see in Planeswalkers that are general, right? This card is technically a general Planeswalker. What I mean by that is all of her abilities aren't honed in on the same exact thing, right? You get to search, that has no connection between the discarding and the ultimate. The discarding potentially can lead to more of the ultimate, right? But for the most part, the abilities are just good abilities put on a Planeswalker, right? It's not like the plus plays into the second, plays in. Like Liliana Dreadhorde General, right? She makes a token, and she can have both players sack creatures, right? And she has a static that lets you draw cards when your stuff dies. Those 3 things all play nicely together, right? I don't remember the ultimate offhand, but the ultimate doesn't matter as much. But yeah, those things all work together, right? So they're more cohesive. When I see a general Planeswalker, I want them to be a little bit lower power. When I see a targeted Planeswalker, very narrow Planeswalker, I like to see it boosted a little bit. This, since it is more of a general Planeswalker, I like where it's at in terms of power level. I think she deserves a 4, and it could just be because I'm a Lily simp. But I mean, she has a 10, and she's a mythic. God, shit and damn. I probably shouldn't be cursing that much, but I'm recording this late at night. I'm feeling okay. Shut up, kid jobs. No, stop messing with the plant. Oh. Anyway, Vampire Nocturnus. Really cool card. Deck building. You want to be playing with nothing but black cards. You want to be playing with a bunch of vampires. It modifies the rules. You play with the top card revealed. It doesn't really have keywords unless you have the top card be black. Sure, okay. I guess technically I would count the costs here as well. It's triple black, which is okay. But also, like, the cost of having a black card on top is very interesting, because it doesn't count swamps. It doesn't count lands, because lands don't have colors. Asterisk. But yeah, I mean, I think for complexity, I think this card's a nice 4 here. I think it does enough things that are slightly interesting, you know, because it changes the deck building. You know what? It changes the board state a little bit as well. If you have things like cards like Sense's Divining Top, or anything that can shuffle your library, like any fetch land, even just like Evolving Wilds, right? You can at any moment change the top of your deck, right? And so for that reason, it does get a little bit extra nudge. Again, this is probably a little bit closer to like 3.6, 3.7, but I'm rounding it up. I think that's totally fine. Splashiness. This is a weird vampire lord, right? I should say for squareness, this does get a nod. It is trip black with 3/3, although technically speaking, it will be 5/4 a decent amount of the time. It might have an immediate impact. It might. It doesn't. The size not technically there. But, you know, it might have an immediate impact where you play this, you have a horde of vampires just rise into the sky, get boosted to hell, and then attack. Okay, we will deal with the cat in a moment. I think she's just really bored. She's just meowing, dude. She's just meowing. Anyway, yeah, the card's totally fine. In terms of power level, constructed, I'm almost certain this card saw constructed play, because I want to say this was around with the Zendikar vampires, because I know it had the vampires from Alara, from Grixis specifically, and then I'm fairly certain this, yeah, because the vampires in Zendikar Zendikar's what's next after this, isn't it? I don't remember. Regardless, I'm fairly certain at some point this was played in normal constructed. In EDH, it's actually played in 1% of decks, which I'm kind of surprised by. But I mean, it goes into like every vampire deck, as you can see. So it definitely sees play. Like the card's good. Because of the fact that your top card, like the fact that lands don't count towards it, can be a bit messed up. If this said is black or a swamp, even if it didn't say land that can produce black mana, even if it just said swamp, I think the card would be a lot stronger. As is, I think it's a really reasonable 3. So 10 points here. I guess I should also give it a the splashiness also comes from the fact that the art and the name are just sick. Raymond Swollen did a fantastic job here. Holy crap, this is gonna be a long episode because I keep talking about my freaking splashiness meter and everything. I mean, easy mythic here. Easy mythic. It's a 10 that, you know, isn't a planeswalker or anything like that. Easy mythic. Now, give me one moment while I help my cat from boredom. And he's back. Moving on to Zathrid Demon. Card only ever reprinted, Commander 2014. Both versions only worth under $1. I'll say. Now, when it comes to splashiness, right? Sorry, when it comes to complexity, you have to sacrifice a thing. Then your opponent loses something. Then if you can't, you tap this and you lose some life. Now, this is a relatively common demon theme, or at least it was in the past of Magic. Lord of the Pit had a very similar thing. It changes the way you have to build your deck. All right. It's a big dude who wants you to constantly sack things. However, if you sack things, it will benefit you. Your opponent will lose life based on the sacrifice creature's power. So you can build this into a deck that wants to sacrifice things. You can't sack itself. So you might want to have something like Phyrexian Tower, for example, that allows you to sacrifice it instead of, you know, you losing 7. It has Flample, which is some decent keywords here. It does, you know, it changes up the board state. It makes it very confusing. It's like, am I going to attack with these creatures thinking they might get blocked and die before I get, you know, a chance to sacrifice them to the good Lord Zathrid Demon here? Or, you know, do I just pass the turn and hope my opponent doesn't attack me and I need to chump? Do I attack with Zathrid Demon, or do I keep it around? Right? Do I try to kill my opponent with Zathrid Demon's power, or do I try to kill it with his ability? I was gonna say power again, but I'm stupid. Anyway, I think it has a really good complexity here. I think it's nice and crisp. When it comes to splashiness, it's not square. It's a 6 mana, 7/7, and you lose 7. I understand the card would be worse if it were 7 power, or 7 mana, 7/7. But it'd be more square. Okay. So it does lose some points there. That said, it does have a very interesting effect. The effect is flavorful. You know, the fact that this has been a thing that demons have done for a long time. Wizards doesn't do it as much anymore, which saddens me because I think I love the power at any cost angle, but you know, homogenization of that. Anyway, it doesn't have an immediate impact necessarily. It is a 7/7, which I guess is technically undercosted. So like the size, the thing is the size isn't that bad, right? 6 mana, 7/7. It's not terrible. Doesn't technically impact the board as soon as it comes down. It can impact your board negatively. If everything but it dies, which can be a difficulty. But in terms of flashiness, you know, it is a big flampling demon with an interesting effect. We'll go to a nice even 3. In terms of power, I don't recall this ever seeing play. In EDH, ooh, it can be played in a lot of decks and isn't really. I mean, that really is showing you something. It was literally printed into this deck. And yet, it's not played very frequently. That's because it's kind of just bad. Even in casual. As I said earlier, casuals don't like to... By the way, I'm not saying casuals is a derogatory term. As I said, I'm talking about like my personal experience as a casual. Your results may vary. Casuals tend not to like losing their creatures or losing life for not losing their creatures. So yeah, there it's not great. The only place that it could be strong is limited because of the fact that it's 6 mana Flampler. Yes, you do have to sacrifice things. Depending on the limited environment, that could be easier or harder. I mean, for example, like if this were a rare in Decayed Limited, this card would probably be nuts, right? You make the Decayed tokens. You don't attack with them, you just attack with Zathra Demon, you sack the Decay tokens. You're dealing, your opponent is losing the 2 life that they would have lost if you attacked and the Decay tokens got through, right? So in some context, it'll be strong and limited. In others, it probably won't. There might not be enough creatures that you want to attack. Or formats that want to go tall, for example. If this were a rare in the, I mean, it wouldn't make sense on Ikoria, but if this were a rare on Ikoria, it probably would be kind of bad. Because of the fact that Ikoria, I mean, you had like the cycling deck, but the cycling deck is really low to the ground. You don't really want to be losing your creatures because some of them do build themselves up with +1/+1 counters. It wouldn't be good there. So it can be stupid in a limited environment. It really does depend. For power level, it's not good. I'm sad that it's not good. But it's not good. It's a little too weak. And the sad thing is, the reason it's too weak is the reason that it has complexity knot. It's the reason that it has some splashiness. It's the effect. It's the demon effect that has been phased out, probably because it makes cards very weak. And as a very weak card, it missed it. I gotta figure out how to do this. But you know what? We're in growing pains. All right. Bogarden Hellkite. This card. Complexity. This has Flash in red. Now, I know Flash is in red a decent amount, but it's a big off dragon with Splash. Her Flash? Splash? Flash. It has flying as well, and its ability, you can deal 5 damage divided as you choose among any target. Or any targets, I should say. So many options, legitimately. The fact that this has flash means it can flash in, block a creature, shoot another creature. You can flash this in at your like you're playing against control. You flash it in on your control opponent's end step. They counter it. You untap. You cast another one. You dome them in the face. You know, there's a bunch of different things. It's just, I know it's just 5 damage, but the fact that it's on a body and it has flash, means it does things. All right, it does things. For complexity, this one again is kind of in between 3 and 4. It's definitely not under complex. I think maybe it doesn't really have any deck building requirements. Once it's on the board, the board state really doesn't matter. It doesn't have any interesting costs. I think this is closer to a 3 than a 4. It's definitely between there, but I think it's closer to a 3 than a 4. In terms of splashiness, the size is huge. These, you know birds for scale? Yeah, this thing has dragons for scale. These are other fucking dragons. I'm fairly certain those are other dragons. I'm pretty sure they're supposed to be other dragons. This thing is just huge. Or they're like really... Oh, no, I was going to say, or they're like really distant, but no, these are in front of the dragon. Yeah, I'm fairly certain these are dragons. This is a bigger dragon. It's huge. It's a big dragon. All right, there's splashiness there. Q. The effect, it is just like 5 damage. You can also just dome your opponent for 5, and 5 is a fourth, a quarter, 25% of starting life total in constructed. So it does have a nice effect there. It literally has an impact. Literally. Impact. You play it. You hit things for a total of 5. Impact. Flavor. I don't care about Bogardian. I don't care. I do not. This looks like it was only printed as a rare in Time Spiral, reprinted as a mythic here, and then not reprinted in any like anthology master commander thing. It was a rare in Iconic Masters, but then it went back to being mythic in commander decks. So, okay. Splashiness, I'll give an average 3. I think average 3 is totally reasonable. In terms of power level, it is part of a combo deck. You can storm out to get some Hellkites and just kill your opponent. I think there are other dragons that do a better job, especially now with the 5 mana 5/4. I can see the art in my mind, but I can't remember the name of the fucking card. Whatever, it's a dragon. It's a 5 mana 5/4. It like deals damage when other stuff enters. Whatever. That's it. Like, you can't take away the fact that it has been in combo decks. I don't know if it was in combo standard, because I didn't play standard around here. But I do know in Dragonstorm was in Time Spiral block. I don't remember which set Dragonstorm was in, but it was definitely in Time Spiral block. Was it in Scourge? Bro, real talk. Drag. What set were you in? Okay, it was. Oh my god. I got both of them right. It was in Scourge first and was reprinted in Time Spiral as a Time Spiral time-shifted card. Also, it's historic right now. Yo, shout out to me remembering Scourge. Yeah, I'm fairly certain that it was played in that in standard. In EDH, probably not a lot. I mean, 1%'s not technically terrible. It's not 0. But it definitely isn't a ton. Even Dragon decks technically don't want this that much. And it really does come down to the 8 mana. Like, if you're gonna be casting this card, you're gonna be cheating it out with something like Dragonstorm or reanimating it, because you're not casting it normally. You're just kind of not. Even in limited, the card, like, at rare, like, it's a really impactful card at rare, but it costs 8. In limited, especially draft, less so for sealed, but in draft, like, the difference between 6 mana and 7 mana is huge. The difference between 7 mana and 8 mana is fucking enormous. I mean, it makes me sad to do it. You know what? No. Because it was played in a time. In combo decks. I'm giving it a 3. Q. I'm giving it a 3, and I'm giving it Mythic. I think that there's enough... Like, this is the average Mythic. Like, I think there is just enough here to say it deserves its spot as a Mythic. Next up is Chandra Nalar. Loser Planeswalker. Complexity. This Chandra's not complex. She can deal damage to a player, deal damage to a creature, or deal damage to a creature and player, or a player and all their creatures. That's what she does. She deals damage. That's it. That's what she does. I mean, she can affect the board by minus Xing. She does come down with 6 loyalty. Not terrible. But at the end of the day, she just does damage. And you might be saying, like, how is this any different from Jace from State Farm? And essentially, Jace from State Farm does only draw for the first 2. His ultimate's different, but whatever. But the difference there, I think, is the fact that no matter what, you're drawing a card. And Jace just wants to draw cards. He doesn't care if he dies. Chandra has to hurt herself to protect herself, which feels very weird. Look, I don't find this Chandra very complex. She's getting a 2 from me. All right. In terms of Splashiness, once again, Planeswalker's a minimum of 2 Splashiness, just off the bat, off rip. As for Chandra's like effect on the board, she's not even round, which is upsetting. Like 5 mana 5 loyalty, although frankly she'd be garbage without the 5 loyalty. Man, again, we can't really give the early walkers nods for flavor just because we don't know much about them. Now we know Chandra does like to just burn things. That is kind of her MO. It's not very splashy to me either. I'm giving it the Planeswalker minimum. The ultimate, very splashy. I will agree that the ultimate, very splashy. The first 2 abilities are not. If there was a little bit more splash to them, you know, if the plus was deal 2 damage, then cool, whoop-de-doo. But it's not very splashy. In terms of power level, very similar to Liliana in terms of power level, actually. Although I, was talking crap about her, she does what she does decently. It only takes 3 turns if you're just plussing her to get to her ultimate, plus ultimate, and dealing 50% of your opponent's health, as well as just yeeting the majority of their creatures. Oh wow, oh okay. Interesting formatting. I forgot, like, this is too much to get into right now, but rules had changed for stuff like this. Anyway, yeah, I mean, honestly, I guess there's a difference between her and Nissa, or Liliana. Liliana is a wide walker, so I'd expect her to be a little stronger. Sorry, a little weaker. Chandra is a narrow walker. She does burn, and she's a little bit too weak, so she doesn't get the same hit as Liliana. I think I gave Liliana 4. I don't remember, because I'm not writing these separately. I'm writing these aggregate, which might be stupid. Oh well, I don't care. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. She's like a 3-point something, but it's rounding down. It's definitely not as strong. She still gets a mythic though. Moving on. Oh right, how much she played in EDH? Not at all. Damn, get effed. Garrick Wildspeaker. I know for a fact this card saw play. Anyway, Derek, complexity. You get to untap 2 target lands. You get to choose them not to be yours. That's pretty sick. You make a token. You overrun. It's not very complex. It's not complex, but it's definitely not complex, right? Like, you know what you're doing with Derek. You bring Derek down. You either make a dude, you untap some lands to make a dude, frankly, or you make your dudes kill a dude. Like, That's kind of it. This is what he does. That's what the dog doing. Splashiness. I don't think I'd say he's more splashy than Chandra. I don't think he's more splashy than Chandra. I mean, he's buff AF, so I'll give him a point for size. The effect is interesting because you get to untap 2 target lands. Like that's an interesting effect, and you just have like overrun on a card, which is also interesting. He is close to being square as well. I mean, like, you know, if you squint, like, this is 2, these are 2, this is 2. And then we got 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. So, you know, he'll get a partial square. I think he's interesting enough. Maybe I'm just being mean to Chandra. For what it's worth, I hate Garrick. Everyone loves Garrick. All right, Liliana did nothing wrong. In terms of power level, I know for a fact this card saw constructed play. All of its abilities were like just good. They were just good. At EDH, I wouldn't be surprised if he still seems some play. I mean, 2% is not awful. We've seen a lot of 1s today. It's not a ton, but you know, you got to remember the fact that like green, especially nowadays, has a lot of choices for 4-drops. A lot of stupid good choices. And the fact that Garrick is still seeing the amount of play he's seeing, I think is still a testament to how good he is. In casual, I don't think I played Garrick. Did I play Garrick in casual? I don't remember if I did or if... No, I think Nathan did. I don't recall. Someone played Garrick, and I think Garrick was pretty decent. Because you usually just, like, make a beast, untap some lands, make a beast, untap some lands. And what's nuts about this card is you can... It comes down, you plus 1 to protect it, right? You grow one of your creatures, or you have one of your creatures fight something else with the mana that you have. And then the very next turn, you can use your Overrun effect. And Overrun is a good card. Speaking of which, in Limited, if this card were rare, it would essentially just be Overrun with extra stuff attached. And Overrun is already really good in Limited. Therefore, this is getting easy for. Really, really good card, really strong, powerful card. 9, it only got to a 9 because it doesn't scream complexity for me, but still, very easy mythic here. I don't think anyone can really argue that. I mean, even more than Chandra here, right? Next up, Master of the Wild Hunt. Okay. Complexity. Okay. He cares about wolves. He makes you wolves. You can tap some wolves to do some stuff with your wolves. It's a lot. Okay. It adds to your board. It cares about your deck building because you want to play wolves. You definitely want to play more wolves, but even if you don't, like, this makes wolves. And then you can do his ability at instant speed. You don't get a choice on how many wolves to tap. You have to tap all of your untapped wolves, which is fucking complex. The fact that you don't have a choice is actually complex here, because you have to know, like, hey, when's the correct time to do this? Because, fun fact, all of your wolves deal damage to a creature, and that creature deals divided damage to your wolves. So you can just have your wolves all die, but maybe you need some wolves, right? It's confusing. And its cost is weird. It's tap all. I guess that's actually part of the effect. But you know what? Q. You tap all the wolves. Q. I'm counting that as a thing. Splashiness. Oh, I want to say this is a 5, but it's not. It's not a 5. Like, Godsire's a 5, this is not a 5. In terms of splashiness, it's a dude who gives wolves. It doesn't immediately give wolves. The size is, you know, fine. It's a big, tall man. Because I'm pretty sure wolves are bigger than that, actually. So he's decently tall, if those wolves are to scale. Which I feel like they might not be. I feel like those wolves are a little bit too short. The effect is very splashy. You are literally having all of your wolves gang up on somebody. Literally calling in the dogs. And you're saying, sick 'em. And they sick 'em. Sure, they get to fight back. But you are literally sicking wolves on them. So that's definitely splashy. Flavor, I mean, Master of the Wild Hunt, he's literally the master of the hunt, boys. It's good. It's good. It's not amazing. I'm only giving it a 3. Because it's not, you cast this card and your opponent says, oh, but they say that because of its power, not because it's like, it's a Godsire. In terms of power level, this card has only technically been printed once, which is probably why it cost that much. It is in only 1% of decks, but again, it cares specifically about wolves, which is a thing, and green does have a decent amount of stuff. So I'll say 1% is still pretty decent. This is not legendary. If this card were rare and limited, especially at 4 mana, yeah, I don't see you losing that game. I just don't see you losing that game. Yeah, no, I mean, this card's strong. I'm leaning between 3 and 4. I think I'm just going to give it a 3. I think it's closer to 3 than 4. But still, in my opinion, easy mythic. Like this card is like a nice power level for a mythic. Like it's a little complex. We got some nice crisp complexness there. The splashiness is okay. Mostly it's because the effect is very interesting. And then the power, I think, is like just right. This card is not too strong. It's very limited in what it does, like what it wants to do. But you can still have multiple of these out. Technically speaking, they might not all help. But I guess that's a strike against it in terms of power level. Because notice, it's just each wolf tap this way. So if you're tapping all of your wolves, it doesn't really do anything, does it? But you can have extra, which will give you more wolves, which is nice. Yeah, I mean, I think Mythic is reasonable. If this card were reprinted in a draft set, I think it has to stay Mythic. But this is one of those that I think could maybe be printed as rare in like a supplemental type set. But so far it's been printed in Masters 25 as a Mythic, and the list it's a Mythic, so it's fine. It's definitely fine. Protean Hydra. This is a very interesting case. This card was first printed here at Mythic, and then was immediately reprinted in the subsequent core set and downshifted to rare. Was that fair? Let's find out. In terms of complexity, yes, this does have a decent amount of complexity. It has the Hydra complexity, right? The fact that it's a scalar card. You get to choose like when you're casting it. It also cares about +1/+1 counters, so there's some deck construction wanting here. And it does kind of change the rules. Here's how. If damage would be dealt with it, instead, prevent that much damage, remove that many counters. Whenever a counter is removed from it, put 2 counters on it at the beginning of the end step. Notably, this is for each, and I'm pretty sure it says... not just second ability, multiple... Yeah, there we go. This last ability trigger will that many times. So for what it's worth, these are all separate triggers, right? What that means is, if you have a card that cares about putting more counters on, because these are separate triggers, each of them will be treated separately. Depending, of course, on exactly how your +1/+1 counter matters stuff applies, this may or may not change the outcome. Regardless, in my opinion, it has some nice complexity. I think it does very interesting things. It has to survive until the end step in order to get those bigger counters. If you're able to cut all of the heads at once, it dies forever. But if you have even one head, they're growing back twice, right? I do like that. I think I'll give it a 4 in complexity. I think it's a really nice card. It's definitely close. It's between 3 and 4, but I'm gonna give it a 4. I respect it. Splashiness. It has a nice flavor for the splash. Absolutely has a nice flavor. Squareness, meh. Its effect is very interesting. And the way it changes the board, like, it makes it very hard to attack into, right? Because you're never going to block it if it's going to die. Like, if you know it's going to die. And you can attack if you're relatively certain that you know that your opponent can't kill it. So there's some splashiness, but it's not good enough. It's not splashy enough. Man, am I thinking this is a 1 on Splashiness? The art and flavor are really making me want to give it a 2, but I think it's a 1 on Splashiness. In terms of power, I mean, it's probably played in exactly, yeah, +1/+1 counter decks and Hydra decks, like exactly those. Oh, that's an interesting one. You know, 1%, you know, still nothing to scoff at. In limited, I mean, we have Hydras with effects that are more complex than this at rare. Right, the main one I can think of is the Hydra that you can either choose to double its counters or fight something, right? That, I think, has a little bit more of an interesting thing going on. Plus, it's a 0/1 baseline, I believe. Like, that's definitely stronger than this. And I believe that card's rare. Again, I can see the fucking art. I cannot remember what the card's name is. But yeah, I think that's more powerful than this. I think this card's just kind of weak. I don't think it's a 1 for weakness. Like, it still has, like, maybe I'm being too nice to this card. Damn, no, I think I gotta do this. Yeah, I think I have to. This is our lowest score so far at a 6. The thing, right, is it might be too good if it had 1 toughness base, but as it is now, it's just not. It's not super. Is it a 1? Is it a 1 on power? Am I just being mean? You know what? I think it's a 2 on power. I do. I do. I think it's a 2. I think I'm just being a little bit mean to it. Do I think it deserves to be mythic? I don't. And I might be kind of persuaded by the fact that it has been reprinted at rare. But, like, when I think about the Hydras that have been printed since, many of them are stronger and or splashier and or more complex. This is reasonably complex. I give it nice complexity, but we've seen more interesting ones printed since then. I'm sorry for the very long episode. I'm going to try and work on modifying how much I talk about each card. I think I need to give myself a hard limit, or else I'll just ramble. Anyway, Darksteel Colossus, initially printed in Darksteel at a rare. The complexity on this is decent. You know, it has a keyword. I guess technically it has 2 keywords now. It's trample and indestructible. And then, if it would be put into the graveyard from anywhere, reveal it and shovel it into the owner's library instead. That's a weird thing. Right, it cares about deck building because if you can't reanimate it unless you have an instant speed card. Goryo's Vengeance only gets legendary creatures back, if I recall correctly, and that's like one of the only instant reanimation spells I can think of. I guess it does kind of change the rules with that ability as well, of just like this thing has to go back in your library. Which can be good, technically, depending, of course, on how it happens. Like, this can modify, like, decking yourself, whatever, right? It has some interesting implications there. In terms of complexity, though, a lot of it's riding on that actual ability, not the keyword there. I think though it's probably just a 3. I think it's just kind of a 3 here. In terms of splashiness, it's fucking huge. It's an 11/11 fucking robot thing. It's big. It's big. It's big with 2 eyes. It's thick with 3 C's. Okay. It's square. 11/11/11. You'll love to see it. The flavor of it, since this is a reprint, we do know about Darksteel. Darksteel is this weird magical metal on Argentum, aka Mirrodin, aka New Phyrexia. That just like is indestructible, just can't be destroyed. So I'll give it some there. The impact of this card is just like this again is very similar, not the same, to Godsire, right? This is just a big beefy creature that you smack down and you're like, I have trample, you can't destroy this. There's some exile, but remember back in the days when we were young, there was less exile. There's a lot of exile now. But but there was less exile. And this card was threatening. It's definitely a threatening card. How often is it played in EDH? That is a yikes percentage. Although, I mean, it still has like the actual number, like the objective number, is still higher than some. It's just the proportion is lower. So you do have to, have to pay attention to the objective amount. There's a word for this that I'm looking for, and I just don't remember what it is. I think for Splashiness, we give it an even 3. In terms of power level, it costs 11. I don't think it'd be an issue in limited. It's not really played much in EDH. I don't think it was ever played in Constructed. It may have been. One thing I can think of was like Show and Tell and Sneak Attack, and even back then I feel like there was better cards to put in. I could be wrong. I could very well be wrong. Huh. Do I think this deserves a power level at 3? I think man, I think this card is power level like 2.7, and I'm rounding up. I'm being nice and I'm rounding up, and it barely counts as mythic, and a lot of that is standing on the fact that it is just a big beefy dude. You know what? I'm gonna increase its splashiness. I think it should be a 4. I think it is a reasonable splashy card because it's fucking huge. Also, it's adorable. Like, don't at me. That is now new criteria. Is the card adorable or not? And last, we go to Platinum Angel. Now, this card originally was in Mirrodin, aka Argentum, aka New Phyrexia, at Rare, reprinted in 10th edition, X. At Rare, reprinted here at Mythic, Mythic again in the next set, Mythic in the Historic Anthology, Mythic in a bunch of different places. All right, it's been reprinted in like a lot of different like decks and stuff, but Mythic. Okay, complexity. It changes the rules. You can't lose. Your opponents can't win. Okay, she changed the board state. This card is a focus. If your opponent can't kill it, you can't lose. Even if you deck out, you can't lose. As long as Platinum Angel is on the field, you can't lose. And your opponent can't win. You can't win. You can't get out of the game. Let me know in the comments if you know what I'm referencing there. The thing is, right? This has to kind of change your deck building perspective. Because you can't just throw this in any deck, right? You need to protect it. You probably need to ramp it out. You might need to be able to get it back from the grave at, like, instant speed. Obviously, state-based actions will still kill you, but shut up. I'm struggling not to give this. I'm giving it a 3. And here's why. It's like a 3.3, something like that, 3.4 even. But technically speaking, the only thing it really has going for it is the change rules. A little bit of difference in deck building, maybe. Difference in board state, sure. But I don't think it gets to 4 on complexity. I guess it's an artifact creature, which means it's susceptible to more things. It's close. I'm going to stick with my gut and say 3. In terms of splashiness, at the high cost, there's a high cost card. The effect, obviously, is splashy. You can't lose. Like, those words alone, very splashy. It doesn't have an impact on, like, when it hits the board, but it does have an impact while it's on the board, which means that your opponents have to deal with the card, or else you can't lose, which is pretty cool. It's not square. The flavor... There are other angels on Mirrodin, and I deadass don't recall if Platinum is of any other importance. but I don't recall, so I can't give it a flavored nod. For Splashiness, I'm going to give it a nice 3. And for power level, this card has seen play in Historic Reanimator. I don't know if it's seen play literally anywhere else. EDH? Total of 900 gross decks. I don't, I mean, 900 is a lot. 1%, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, you play it in some dumb stuff. Play it in, like, Angel Tribal. You play it in Kozilek because it's stupid. Yeah, I mean, it's decent. If it were rare and limited, would it be... If it were rare and limited, it really depends on the environment and how good the removal is. Especially now that Arena is taking the world by storm. Haha, you laughed. Especially now that there's a lot of people playing limited in Best of One. It makes cards like Platinum Angel stronger. I think it'd be too strong and limited. I think it's a reasonable card if you see it in EDH, and in Constructed, you're only ever cheating it out. But when you're cheating it out, it's fucking annoying to deal with. You have to have something. And if you don't, and you're playing Best of One, haha, just concede. If you do, and you're playing Best of 3, hope you have something in the sideboard, and/or that you can draw it before they kill you. I think very reasonable power level. I think it's nice 3 in the middle there. You know what? I see no reason why it shouldn't be allowed to be mythic here. I think we see other things. Actually, another platinum card from Mirrodin in the future. But yeah, I think there's a reasonable mythic here. Absolutely reasonable. Now let me tally up the scores, and I'll be right back. And I'm back. It looks like with a total score of 134 out of a total possible 225, the M10 has a mythic rating of 60.55, repeating, of course, percent. Did I say 60 point? No, 59.555, blah, blah, blah. I'm rounding it up to 60% mythic rating. I guess that's passing. Maybe I was too stingy on the 5s. Nah. 60's fine as a pass for mythics, I think. Especially since this was a core set. I'm not going to go back to the other sets to see what I would rate their total mythicness out of. But that's M10 as we go on. We'll be able to see what the remainder of the sets will have in terms of like total percentage. I could technically have done it piecewise for like complexity gets this, Splashiness gets this. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll like have a like an Excel sheet, a Google sheet that I'll share with the channel and read only, and just include like after the fact, just breaking them down like by set and stuff. So that might be a fun little thing to do. Or if you want to start that, feel free. It makes it more likely that I'll continue doing it. I would love to thank my lovely patrons for the continued support. Hope you've been... Wait. Gosh, I haven't recorded in so long. I've been busy, by the way. It'll be back to normal soon. Finals are next week. Is it next week or the week after? I don't remember. We're close to the end of the school year, and then hopefully you'll be getting a lot of me. Anyway, if you'd like to join them in supporting the show, you'll find links down in the description. If you would like to see editing in my videos, check out the Patreon, sub to my Twitch, and or become a channel member, because once I reach a certain threshold from, money from this hobby, business, whatever you want to call it, then I will hire an editor to edit things like this. If I have my video, like my games edited, it'll only ever be for like dead noise. But stuff like this, these are the things that I would have like actually edited. Where eventually I won't have to press the buttons and someone will just like have those in for me. And they'll skip all of my fucking rambling. Oh, goodness me. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, and until next time, I'll be one.